Okay, your first Minecraft mod. Outline of things to cover. So the first thing after you've downloaded the starter code and imported it into Eclipse, you need to agree to the End User License Agreement, or EULA. So if you check in Eclipse, here's the first Minecraft mod package. You'll see this file, eula.txt. You need to change false to true. And this is the actual EULA, so you may want to, I don't know, go look at that. Here's their, and this is, I guess this is just updated. It's actually not that long, but basically this is what gives you permission to do modding and things like that. I need to read through this more carefully at some point, but it is sort of short for the as far as these things go. So that's the first thing you have to do. The second thing is you need to use this build XML file all the time to rebuild things. So you'll see you get your source package up here, and of course, since it's a Minecraft mod, you actually have to run a server to get anything to work. So you've got build XML. This is just an XML file. Build XML files are used by a program called Ant. What Ant does is configuration and build management. So there's certain tasks beyond the scope of just compiling, things like zipping, unzipping, copying files, generating Java doc or documentation, things like that need to be automated, because anytime you want to build a sufficiently complicated piece of software, especially software that has a lot of digital assets like images or other types of media files, you need a way to script and automate that that's not, strictly speaking, just a programming language. So if you've done a lot of C or C++ programming in a Linux or Unix environment, there's a program called Make or CMake or Gmake or something like that, Make, that you're going to use with make files that are scripting out how to compile things and what compilers to use and things like that. Ant is basically an equivalent configuration management system for Java. There's actually meta systems that sort of incorporate a bunch of Ant files together called Maven, and there's a new one called Gradle that I don't know as much about. But for something like this, we just need Ant, and you can kind of see what it's doing. It's copying this canary.inf file from canaryinf into, this is a variable here, bin canaryinf, and it's saying overwrite is true, and then it's jarring up plugin.jar in this destination folder. The destination folder is actually the plugins folder. So this file basically gets recreated, and what it contains is everything in bin. Bin is where all of your class files get compiled to. It's actually a hidden folder. You can't see it here from Package Explorer. You would have to go to Navigator. That's the wrong project. Where is it? Here it is. You'd have to go into Navigator, and you can actually see this bin folder, and you can see that this is getting copied in there. And this other thing, I don't even know what this is, but I'm going to get... This is like legacy stuff I'm going to get rid of. There we go. Yeah, so you can see that this is where the class files physically end up. The Package Explorer doesn't actually show the bin folder because it's not important. From your perspective as a Java developer, you don't really care about the class files. You care about the source files. So you can kind of see that that's what this thing is doing. It's recreating this file, and it's putting it in the plugins folder because when you run your server, all of this stuff is read by the server. The server actually looks in this plugins folder and says, oh, are there any plugins? Oh, yeah, there's this one. Let me go ahead and try to load that. So, you know what? Let me add a bullet point here. The Canary Server itself is the next thing you need to know. That's just basically this class here, Canary Server. You can see it's literally just calling the main method of the main class in CanaryMod, our Minecraft modding framework. So if we go down here and we say run as a Java application, this will fire up. You can see the helpful little canary logo pops up here. This is really chewing up a lot of my memory on this machine. And so you can see everything went ahead and popped up and seemed to run here. And we can see that our example plugin actually loaded. We're getting messages about it. You know, we enabled all these plugins, and we got this example plugin. So we are good to go. We're up and running. Now we can connect. Oh, yeah. Gosh. Well, it's a good thing I'm doing this. So to connect to localhost with Minecraft, we fire up Minecraft. Multiplayer, you need to add a server to join. a lot of people, for some reason, were kind of getting hung up on this. Just put in localhost as the server address. I guess you can also do 127.0.0.1, and you can see this pops up. I've also got one of my other servers here in Leibniz. This is the Noxcraft server that the 141 students are using. We're not really using that. So we'll connect up here, and there. Oh my God, it's raining. I forgot to shut the weather off. But anyway, you can see that we are now connected. Woo! Yay, in the rain. Oh my gosh. And so let's kind of look through the mod a little bit just to get a sense of what's going on. So you can see we've got our example plugin. It extends plugin. It's kind of the entry point of everything. And we're implementing command listener and plugin listener. Now these interfaces are interesting. Watch this. Oh my gosh. Command listener is an interface with no methods. Why would you have an interface with no methods? This is a technique you'll see used in Java from time to time. This means it's a marker interface. By implementing this interface, you're now part of that interface's type hierarchy. It's not giving you any interfaces, but it's allowing you to mark your class as saying, hey, look, I'm a command listener. Now, where this is important, the plugin is implementing command listener. You see down here, we're saying, hey, I'd like to register for commands. If we look at oh my gosh, that's slow. What this is expecting, you'll see it's expecting a command listener and a command owner. Well, what command listener is it expecting? Well, this is a command listener. This is a reference to the current plugin. It's a reference to the current instance. So when we register commands, we have to give it a command listener, something that's listening for commands. Well, to listen for commands, you just go ahead and implement that interface, and now any class that implements the interface can be passed to this register commands location. So it's not functionally doing anything. It's just a way of marking this class as a command listener, which gives a lot of information to the programmer. So it's almost like a bit of documentation at this point. It's something that's primarily for the program. It has no, it's information for the program. It has no functional effect. So, you know, you have an enable and a disable method. Any resources you create, network connections, database connections, things like that, you always want to release those when you disable a plugin. Enabling the plugin, we're getting the login manager, logman, not login, logging manager. Logging, you'll note over here, all these messages are marked with info or warning or something like that. So if you look over here at the methods that the log manager has, you'll see there's debug, there's error, there's fatal, there's info, and there should be warn at the bottom. Where's warn? Oh, there's trace, and where's warn? There it is, warn. So instead of using just print lines where we're printing something, we're actually using a logging framework. And it's a little weird that CanaryMod makes its own thing called Logman. There's actually a bunch of perfectly good logging frameworks in Java. I don't know why they wrote their own, but they did. But they all kind of follow the same general rules. You have different granularities of messages: trace, debug, info, warn, error, and fatal, in that order from least important to most important. And so the different messages you're putting in there, you just sort of call these methods. And if you set the lowest level of granularity, I want everything to be printed, then it'll print everything, and it'll mark what the granularity is. But some of the things are in there, trace level messages and debug level messages. Those are just very verbose messages for debugging purposes. And when you want to run the software in a production environment, you don't want those messages, so you just tell the logging framework, hey, listen, only give me things info or higher, or warn or higher, or error or higher, and it'll skip a whole lot of those messages. This way you don't have to constantly add print statements and then delete them or comment them out for your code. You just put these logging statements in there, and then you just leave them there, and you can turn them off, turn off entire levels of granularity as you so desire. Now, other things happening in here, we're registering us to listen for commands. This here is just an idiom. Canary is a class, and commands, you can see it's in italics, it's a static method. This is using what's called the Singleton Pattern. We have a static method that just returns the single unique instance of the commands module that handles all commands for each CanaryMod server. So it's a singleton pattern because there should only be one instance. You shouldn't be able to create multiple instances of things that might listen for commands, then they would fight with each other. It's just the one. So we're registering this plugin as something that's going to listen for commands. And you can see down here, here's the commands that it's listening for. Now we're using annotations, this command annotation, here and here. You're laying out what are the aliases for your commands. You have a verbose description. If there's permissions, if you have to be in certain categories, if you have to be the server operator or something like that to run these commands. And then tooltips. I think this is like for the help menu or something like that. Then you've got the actual method. Now, because we've marked this as a... oh my gosh. What in the hell did I just... Oh, okay, that's what happened. Because you've marked this as a command listener, and then registered it to listen for commands, whenever somebody types something in, server-side, it's going to say, well, who's listening for commands? Let's see if any of these commands match. So it'll sort of call all the classes and call all the methods that are looking for commands and see if anything matches. And so if one of these commands does match, it'll invoke this method. So suppose you're sort of logged into Minecraft here and you type block. You'll see, boom, I ended up with a block of dirt. Well, how did that happen? Well, set block, we've got the message receiver here. That's just a class that keeps track of who generated the message. So we're calling it sender because I'm the one that, SpacDog's the one that typed in the command, originated the message. Args here, this is for extra command line arguments. So, for example, if I did something like block, right, so you see it still just did block, but it actually passed all the rest of that stuff in this string array. We've got a debug statement in there, that's fine. We're getting the world, so we're saying sender, get your player, and then get the world that they're in. Then we're saying sender, get your player, get their current position. We're saying, okay, in that world, put a block at that position, and I'd like the block to be of type dirt. And so we're going ahead and creating dirt at that particular location. And so you can imagine going in and changing a bunch of stuff in here to do, I don't know, a whole bunch of different types of other things that you might want to do. Excellent. Oh, and we're also registering to listen for a bunch of hooks. The only hook we have is this login hook. Hooks are sort of like action listeners from the first Draw Shapes assignment. So when you click the mouse, it generates a mouse click event, and then anybody listening for those events gets notified. This is kind of the same thing. Hooks are sort of like events, so you can hook in so that every time a certain thing happens, you get a callback and get to add some functionality, and that's what's happening here. This is an onLogin hook, which has this connection hook, meaning a user's just connected. And you can see what we're doing. We're just going ahead and saying, oh, printing out some message. I guess we're printing whether the player is allowed to build stuff. Like, basically, are you allowed to lay blocks manually? Because the idea is we don't actually want people to be able to lay blocks manually in our Noxcraft mod that the 141 students are using. We only want them to be able to do with Java code. So this actually, you can tell I copied this onLogin hook from there, but then I commented this out because we don't need to be as strict in the graphics class because the focus is very different. We're sort of building out our own set of plugins. Great. So what else do we have? Oh, CanaryMod has a huge API. So if you click on this, bring up the API, oh my gosh, there's a lot of stuff in here. There's a ton of CanaryMod potential functionality and things like that. And so how do we navigate this? How do we manage it? I mean, we could go into this API and just kind of click on everything and read through it, but it turns out that this whole API, basically all the source and documentation, is already linked in to Eclipse. So one of the things people were trying to do earlier today was to create an item. So they were like, okay, item, I don't know, is that a class? Hey, yeah, it is. There's net CanaryMod API, inventory, it's an item. Item I. And I want to go ahead and create one of these. But I don't know how to. Well, it turns out the documentation's linked in, so if you hover over this, you actually get the documentation, but you also get the ability to do some other things with Eclipse. If you right-click on this and do Open Type Hierarchy, or hit F4 or Function F4 on a Mac, you actually get this lovely type hierarchy. You can see that this item it's only an interface, right? So we can't directly create it, invoke a constructor, because you see the I here, it's just an interface. We can see, oh look, canary item, that's the one implementation of this interface. Double click on that, bam, here we go, canary item. This is the actual code. Now you see up here you got this 0101, kind of this binary action going on here. That's because this code is just source code that's been linked to precompiled code, our CanaryMod server. So like, I'm hitting enter and I'm trying to type. I can't actually change this, but I can view it. So now I've found canary item, but I still don't really know. I look at this, there's a bunch of constructors, I don't know which one to use. Well, I can actually right-click on this and say, okay, references, project. Show me everything, every place where this is used. Check this out. Here's all the places where this is used. I don't know, net CanaryMod entity, Canary armor stand. I don't know. Canary armor stand uses a canary item. Where does it use it? I don't know. Let's see. There we go. Canary item, stack array item. I don't know. Here we go. It's used here. So you can kind of look through all of this and get examples of how this stuff is used, which is extremely useful. So when you see an interface you don't really know, bring up its type hierarchy with F4 or by right-clicking and saying open type hierarchy. When you find a class you're not sure what's up with it, just go ahead and bring up its references within the project or within your entire workspace perhaps. And then when you get in here, you might be looking around and thinking, item type from ID and data, that method looks interesting, but I'd like to see how it's implemented. Well, you can actually right-click that and say Open Declaration or hit F3 or Function F3 on a Mac, and then bam, now we've jumped to a totally different class and right to that method that we were looking at. So this ability to open type hierarchies, look for references to a method or to a class, and then to open up method declarations or class declarations just with these quick clicks in Eclipse is actually a very good way to take some enormous API like this, where it's hard to get a sense of it, and then actually navigate through the source and see much more specifically how everything's used. This is very important, not just for Java and Eclipse, but really for any programming language where you're going to have large object-oriented APIs and large bases of object-oriented code that you need to be able to dig through and make sense of. Using the tools available to you in the editor is actually going to be critically important in that process. And I think actually type hierarchy references and method declarations, those are the other things that I wanted to cover. And I did want to put this out as a video so that you can go in later and watch it. So thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you again soon.